Zinnemann thought, hey, this is a really great idea, because up until this point in Deborah Kerr's career, she played very prim, proper, ladylike parts. And to have her cast in the role of a woman who's unfaithful to her husband, who's promiscuous, who sleeps around, well, that kind of counter-casting definitely was interesting, and it appealed to Cohn. And they said, yeah, let's give her this role. And it really, really did give her career a boost, because it opened up a wide variety of different roles for her. Then there's Eli Wallach. He had just come out of the Actors Studio. He had made a couple films at this point, and he was cast in the role of Maggio. He was all set. He was ready to go. And then, of course, Frank Sinatra intervened. Sinatra's career was on the ropes at this point. His voice was failing. Many of the movies that he had made up to this point were very lighthearted musicals, hadn't done anything serious. And to add insult to injury, his marriage to Ava Gardner was failing at the time, too. He read the book. He knew that he could play the role of Maggio to a T. Some accounts say that he was on the set in Africa of Mogambo, which his wife Ava Gardner was making with Clark Gable. Some accounts say that he left the set, flew back to California on his own dime, did a screen test, which Cohn grudgingly gave him, and offered to play the role for nothing. There is, of course, that old story perpetuated by The Godfather that certain outside influences were put to bear for him to get this part. Zinnemann says in his biography that there were no animals harmed in the casting of Frank Sinatra for the film, thankfully. He did end up signing for the role, of course, and he was paid a paltry $8,000 for the part. But he was right. It did save his career. It completely revitalized him. And again, just like Carr, but even more so, opened up a wide variety of roles for him. 2 years later, he stars in The Man with Golden Arm about drug addiction. He was nominated for an Oscar there. Manchurian Candidate is less than 10 years after this. So really transformed his career as well. The role of Lorraine, played by Donna Reed. Zinnemann wasn't too crazy about her, but he knew he couldn't win every casting battle with Cohn. She was under contract to Columbia, and so he relented and cast her. And he later said that he was happy that it worked out that way, because he was very pleased with what she did with the role. The one casting decision that no one argued with was that of Burt Lancaster. He was the first choice for the role of Sergeant Warden. And one curious thing I read when I was researching for this was that he was actually intimidated by being in the film with Montgomery Clift. He said that he had never worked with an actor of his stature. I mean, Clift is coming out with what do they call it? My mind is going blank. The Stanislavski method. Yeah, he was one of the first method actors, and apparently he felt, he actually confided in friends that he was afraid he was going to get blown off the screen by Montgomery Clift. Burt Lancaster, who probably has more screen presence than every movie star we have working today in his little thumb. Great still. I love that still, with Sinatra looking on as well. And then, of course, there's Ernest Borgnine. You know, there wasn't really much going on as far as his career was concerned at this time, but this is certainly one that made his career an indelible performance. And apparently he was, the one bad thing about this role for him was that he was cast as heavies then for about the next 15 years. And in his biography he says that he had a hard time shaking those roles because of this part. And then, of course, there's Superman in the background there. George Reeves. There was also a rumor surrounding the film that Reeves' part was much more significant, that a great deal more footage had been shot than appeared in the movie, but that was later discounted as being not true. There's Zinnemann again. Production starts in Hawaii. It took them 41 days to shoot the film, only 41 days. And the budget was $2 million. I've seen figures of $2 million to $2.5 million, which made it the most expensive film produced that year. Just an enormous amount of money at that time. Interesting sidebar as far as that's concerned. As soon as they greenlit the production, they had to, an effort was made to go through Army surplus stores around the country to find uniforms and equipment that was used during that time. And they just were looking everywhere to get uniforms that would be accurate to this time period, and also looking for soldiers that knew how to use this stuff. And many of the soldiers you see in the film in the background are actual combat veterans or ones that were enlisted at the time. And there we go. There it is. There's the cove where the famous beach scene was shot. Zinnemann says that in years to come after the movie was released, this became a regular tourist destination. Bus tours on the islands would stop there and point out that this was the famous beach where Burt Lancaster and Deborah Kerr embraced. One of the things that, another obstacle that they had to overcome was getting the cooperation of the Army. They knew that to really make this thing seem as authentic as it should be, they needed the cooperation of the State Department and the U.S. Army, and of course they were going to have to really jump through a lot of hoops to get that done, because of course this is not the most positive look at the armed forces and officers all the time. Adler was a lieutenant colonel in the Army when he, at the end of World War II, and he knew some people within the State Department, and he was able to smooth over some of the bumps and some of the opposition that they were going to meet, and they actually did get permission to shoot at Schofield Barracks in Hawaii. And that sense, that's one of the great things I think about the film, especially when you look at other war films that are made in the early 50s. They don't have that sense of realism that From Here to Eternity does, and I think it really helps separate it from the other movies made during that period. There's Zinnemann there with Clift on the set, and Marlon Brando stopped by one day. He knew Zinnemann from a film that they had made together called The Men, about World War II veterans coming home dealing with their physical disabilities and also trying to acclimate themselves back into civilian life. Zinnemann really didn't have many problems with the cast or anything like that, and just as he had thought, Clift just threw himself into the role, preparing for it in every way he possibly could. Claude Akins was a retired, he had been in the Army during World War II as well. He was a boxer. You'll see him in From Here to Eternity. He pops up in a couple of scenes, and Clift insisted that he teach him how to box. And I guess they worked long hours together on Clift's boxing prowess, which you really don't ever see in the movie. When you watch it, you'll see there's a lot of tight shots, a lot of cutaways, because even though he worked and worked, apparently he still, to Zinnemann's mind, didn't quite have that boxing ability or the boxing skills that were needed to pull this off. He also worked tirelessly to learn how to play the bugle. He knew that his bugle playing would be dubbed in, but he felt that he needed to know, he needed his throat and mouth movements to be precise, that he needed to make sure that they were accurate and real, even though the playing would be dubbed in, and apparently he worked tirelessly as well on that, even though you only see him play in the movie 2 or 3 times. So really, really put himself into the movie. Jones was on the set, and apparently he made quick friends with Sinatra and Clift. He claims also to have suggested that Clift be cast in the film, having met him at a literary party in New York about 6 months before the film went into production. He said later on that all of his girlfriends said that Montgomery Clift acted just like he did in the movie. Apparently, they would go on these long drinking binges together, this motley trio, and their nights were very simply summed up by Jones, who said, well, we would sit around, we would drink, Montgomery Clift and I would talk about the injustices of life and love, and Frank Sinatra would talk about Ava Gardner. And that's how their evenings were, apparently. According to Jones as well, apparently Sinatra, during the course of the film, became so despondent over the state of his marriage that he had threatened to commit suicide, and that Clift had talked him out of it, according to Jones.